What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Clemente Collector. And on today's episode, I'm doing a deep dive, and I'm really excited about this. So, during the 60s, there were a big four, in my opinion: Mantle, Mays, Aaron, and Clemente. To me, those were the top of the mountain as far as the best players of the 60s. Um, and whenever I hear people debate about who was the best, Clemente is always the fourth out of those four. And something that I never hear people talk about is the fact that Clemente might have never had a true Robin until later on in his career. And the other guys did. And I feel like it's unfair to look at him in the same light as the other players. But that's just my thought process. I need to look at stats to back it up. And some of my favorite things to do is go on Baseball Reference and look at the stats and see if my hypothesis is actually true. Did Clemente get screwed by being on the Pirates and by possibly not having great teammates? Or did one of the other big four actually, succeed really good for not having great teammates? And a lot of people would say, well, teammates don't matter. All that matters is what that individual player did. And I actually don't think that's true. I'm going to explain why teammates matter towards the end of this. But first and foremost, I want to figure out, did Clemente have the worst teammates as far as a sidekick goes in his career compared to the other three of the big four? So let's get into it right now, guys.
Batting third, playing right field, number 21, Roberto Clemente.
All right, so how did I do it? So what I did was I looked at a 13-year window from 1956 till 1968. So all the stats you'll see today are that 13-year window. Why did I use a 13-year window? Because for one, Mantle's career ended in 1968. So I had to end by 1968. And for two, Clemente's first year was 1955, and he didn't play a full schedule or anything like that. So I eliminated Clemente's first year. So that's why I went 1956 to 1968 with all four of these guys. And I felt like it was a great window in their prime. The other thing is, I always looked at the best teammate each year. So, for example, let's look at Hank Aaron, for example. Hank Aaron, everybody that you talk to would say his best teammate was probably Eddie Matthews, which you'll see in the stats is really true. But I didn't just pick Eddie Matthews in 19 whatever number you want to say because I assumed he was the best teammate. In this data, I always picked out the person who had the best year behind that star. So you'll see whenever I show you some of the names that sometimes it's actually surprising who the best sidekick was for that year. And last but not least, I did not look at pitchers. This was really for me looking at the player and the hitting side of things. And when you have a great teammate hitting with you, I feel like more offense can be created. And I'll talk about some stats that could have been possibly decreased if you have bad teammates. So I did not look at pitching at all. And you guys could give me pushback in the comments if after you watch this, you feel like I should have looked at pitching. All right, so the first thing I thought to do was to look at WAR. So what I did was I took these 13 years and these four players, and each year I looked at who had the best WAR other than them on the team. All right, so let's look at 1963, for example, okay? So in 1963, Willie Mays' best teammate was Willie McCovey, and he had a 6.5 WAR. Mantle's best teammate was Elston Howard with a 5.2 WAR. Hank Aaron's best teammate was Eddie Matthews with an 8.0 WAR. And Clemente's best teammate was Bill Mazeroski with a 4.7 WAR. So I did that for all 13 years, as you see here. And, you could pause the video if you want to look a little bit closer at each player's teammates those years. But what I did was, to make it really easy, the person who had the best sidekick that year is in dark orange. So in 1956, Mantle had the best sidekick. So the second best sidekick that year, I put in yellow to make it easy to see. So in 1956, Eddie Matthews had the second best WAR, so he's the second best sidekick. And then last, the third best sidekick, I put in light yellow. So in 1956, Mays had the third best sidekick. And I left it in white if you had the worst sidekick that year. So what I actually did though is, and like I said, you could pause this and then hit play again. But what I did was I actually took this chart and I broke it down a little bit easier for everybody. So right here, you'll see based on WAR, Hank Aaron had the best sidekick 7 out of the 13 years. Mays had it the fourth most, or 4 times, and Mantle had it 2 times. Clemente never in the 13 years had the best sidekick. Second best sidekick, which would have been the yellow. Hank Aaron had the second best sidekick 6 out of the 13 years. And then Mantle 5, Mays 2, and Clemente 1. If you notice, though, at the end there, worst sidekick. So Clemente had the third best sidekick 5 times and the worst sidekick 7 of the 13 years. So I don't know. If you don't look at this chart and say Clemente by far, based on WAR, had the least amount of help as far as teammates go, I don't know what else to say, guys. I mean, I think I did it as fair as possible. Like I said, I'd love to get feedback after this is over in the comments. But as you could see, Hank Aaron, of the 13 years, he either had the best or second best sidekick out of the 4 big players here. Okay. And then the chart below, I actually have the overall WAR number and the average per season. So all I did was add up all 13 years. I divided it by 13. So very easy there. And obviously Clemente is last as far as that goes. All right. So I kind of felt like my job was done. I felt like I proved my point. I showed this to my friend Matt, and he gave me a little bit of pushback. And his pushback was, is WAR the best measurement for the best teammate? And there's actually a lot of old school guys out there that probably hate WAR. So they would probably say no. All right. One of the things is WAR looks at the defense. So I didn't only do offensive WAR, I did total WAR. So, you know, like Clemente had Bill Mazeroski on his team. Obviously, he gained a lot of WAR off of his defense. So how much is defense really helping that player have the best sidekick? It usually seems like hitting would be more in favor of making that player have better statistics, I feel. So I do agree with Matt there. And then Matt's second point is WAR looks at position. So once again, the Bill Mazeroski example, because Bill Mazeroski plays second base, he could have a high WAR, even though his stats might be way lower than somebody who's playing right field for a team, or left field or first base. So Matt's feedback was really good. And I said to Matt, I said, okay, I said, help me find another stat we can look at if you feel like WAR isn't the stat to use. So Matt did actually come back to me with another stat to use, and here it is. Runs created. All right. So runs created estimates a player's offensive contribution in terms of total runs. It combines a player's ability to get on base with his ability to hit for extra bases. Then it divides those two by players' total opportunities. So I know that's a lot there, and I actually have the actual formula there below there. But runs created is actually a stat that the sabermetrics community use and love. And if you don't believe me that it's a good statistic, just go and look at Baseball Reference at the top all-time runs created leaders of all time. Number 1 is Barry Bonds, and number 2 is Babe Ruth. All right. And I believe number 4 is Hank Aaron. So go look at it if you don't think it's a good stat to look at. So the other thing that's great about this stat is it takes out position. And it takes out defense. So the two things that Matt gave me pushback on as far as WAR goes, this really looks at every player individually and how they do as far as offense goes. All right. It doesn't matter what position they're in. All right. So I ran the numbers with runs created. So let's look at these. All right. So here is the same kind of chart I did before, but it's best teammate by runs created. So let's look at 1963 again, for example, because I looked at that last time. So in 1963, Mays' best teammate was actually Cepeda and not McCovey, and he had 113 runs created. Mantle's best teammate in 1963 was Trish with 100. Eddie Matthews was still the best teammate for Aaron in 63. He had 106 runs created. And Clemente's best teammate wasn't Mazeroski in 63. It was Clendenin, and he had 75 runs created. So I'm actually liking what I'm seeing here as far as this is actually showing a great teammate as far as offensive firepower goes. So I would say the same thing to you guys. Pause the video if you want to look through this chart a little bit closer. But I did the same thing here. Orange means they had the best teammate, yellow second best, and light yellow third best. And then if they're in the white, that means they had the worst teammate out of the four, the worst sidekick. So now that we looked at this chart, I actually made it, I did an overall chart like I did last time with runs created. So let's look at it. All right. So it's actually kind of crazy. Kind of changed a little bit now. Hank Aaron was heads above everybody before. And now it's actually Willie Mays. So the best sidekick, according to runs created, Willie Mays had 8 out of the 13 years. And a lot of it had to do with Cepeda and Willie McCovey. Hank Aaron still had 4 out of the 13 years. And then Clemente still had 0 of the best sidekick in those 13 years. Second best teammate, Hank Aaron with 5, and then Mantle with 4. And then third best teammate, Clemente was in the lead with 5. And worst teammate, Clemente was in the lead with 5. So once again, we looked at a different way to look at this, but Clemente was clearly at the bottom as far as having the worst teammate. So I don't know what else to, I'm happy to look at a different stat in this same 13-year window if somebody wants to provide it. But I think we have a pretty good picture of what Clemente had as far as a great Robin to his Batman. And then at the bottom there, same thing I did before. Basically, I added up the teammates' runs created, and then I did an average divided by the 13. And obviously, Clemente was the lowest as far as average goes, which is expected with seeing he had the third best and worst teammate a lot of times. So the next question you're going to ask is, okay, you talked me into it. Clemente is the superstar that didn't have a great sidekick during this time frame. But what does that matter? Why does it matter that he didn't have a good teammate? And this is kind of my opinion on it, and I'd love to hear other people's opinion. All right, so I looked at the number of games that these superstars played in that 13-year period. I looked at the plate appearances per game for these 4 guys during that 13-year period. And then I looked at the RBIs per game and the runs per game. So how do you get an RBI? You hit teammates in that are on base, right? How do you score a run? A teammate hits you in, right? So 2 stats, if you look at it, look at runs per game. Clemente had 0.58 runs per game, and look at Mays and Aaron, 0.72. That's crazy. Okay. The next thing you're going to say is, well, those three guys, Mays, Mantle, and Aaron, they had more hits than Clemente during that period. So that's why they had more RBIs and more runs. All right. Actually, I'll show you. You're wrong. Clemente actually had more hits per game than any of the other 3 during this 13-year period. He had 1.24 hits per game. Hank Aaron was very, very close, but as you can see, Mantle and Mays were not. So Clemente had the hits when he was in the games, and obviously, like I said, his RBIs and his runs per game just weren't adding up. So another thing, obviously, that we can look at is we can look at team wins and World Series wins. And, a lot of people would say, well, we just look at individual players. Well, a lot of people look at Mantle and say, wow, he won a lot of World Series also. wow, that guy was a winner. Imagine if Clemente had another World Series under his belt. He'd have 3 instead of 2. I think that would actually change some people's opinions out there as far as, how great he was. And a lot of the stories about the great players was about what they did in the playoffs. And a lot of times Clemente was left out of the playoffs because the Pirates never could put a great teammate around him. So that's all I have for my presentation, guys. This is a little bit different. Normally we look at cards. I actually have my pickups here. I'm going to make a video showing my pickups, but I don't know. What do you guys think? As far as the big four, I call them in the 60s, do you feel like Clemente actually could have had a really, really, really great career if he had better teammates, or at least a sidekick that could be his Willie McCovey or his Eddie Matthews or his Roger Maris? I know some people will say, well, later on on his career, Willie Stargell started turning it on, and Clemente is a Hall of Fame player, and Clemente had Willie Stargell. Don't forget, they won a World Series there in '71 because of that. But that was towards the end of Clemente's career. All these other guys had great stars that were in their prime at the same time as them, and that came up with them. Eddie Matthews, was a rookie the year before Hank Aaron was a rookie. They literally came up together, So I think you got to look at that too. But I'd love to hear below. What do you guys think about this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there a different stat you guys would look at? What do you guys think? Do you guys think if Clemente had another World Series win, or if he had better RBI and run numbers, do you think he would be looked at with those top guys more often, as far as career stats go and things like that? Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one.